Cedar Point is arguably the world's greatest amusement park and is on top of every enthusiast's bucket list. With an incredible lineup of roller coasters, including some of the best in the entire world, this park has it all. It has turned into a destination park for every thrill seeker. In this video, we will talk about what's new for Cedar Point in 2024 and walk through all of the steps to maximize your visit to Cedar Point this year, including a step-by-step guide for your day at the park. Obviously, Cedar Point's biggest addition this year is the long-awaited Top Thrill 2. The Strata Swing Launch Coaster will be the tallest and fastest multi-launch coaster in the world. The original Top Thrill dragster was one of the most beloved coasters at the park, reaching a speed of 120 miles per hour in 3.8 seconds before rocketing up a 420-foot top hat and spiraling back down. The 20 seconds of prime ride time it offered was some of the best in the world, but after its accident in 2021, the attraction shut down and it was announced it would undergo a reimagining. In August, Cedar Point released the animation and announcement video for Top Thrill 2. It was announced that Zamperla would take over the project and add a 420-foot backward spike and make Top Thrill Dragster a swing launch coaster. There has been a lot of controversy over this. Some say Cedar Point cheaped out, and others argue that the spike will only enhance the ride experience. But the only way to know is to ride it yourself. Other than Top Thrill 2, the park still has its world-class lineup of 16 roller coasters. Steel Vengeance is definitely the best ride in the park and might be the best roller coaster in the world. It is the perfect roller coaster. This RMC masterpiece stands 200 feet tall, has over a mile of track, and a world record 27 seconds of airtime. This is a must ride every single visit to Cedar Point. I definitely recommend going to the back of the park at the end of the night so that you can ride Steel Vengeance last. The park doesn't shut down any of the lines before closing, so the goal is to get into line as close to closing time as possible. This coaster averages a wait of an hour, so you have to be strategic about when you get your rides on it. Across the midway is the small but powerful Intamin Blitz coaster, Maverick. This is probably the most intense and balanced coaster at Cedar Point. It has one of the most insane first drops I've ever experienced, snappy transitions, ejector airtime, launches, floating inversions, and two of the craziest elements on a roller coaster with the Stangle dives. This is another must-ride coaster at Cedar Point. It does have poor reliability and capacity, so it will be one of the longest waits you will have. Plus, the queue is in a musty and compact building. It will be hot and make you feel really cramped. This makes Maverick a coaster that you will want to ride right away in the morning before the line gets long and the temperature rises. But I'll get to exactly what order you want to ride everything later in the video. In the front of the park, there are 4 giant V&Ms, each with their own gimmick. Valravn is a 200-foot dive coaster that offers 3 floating versions, 2 really fun drops, and is a solid supporting coaster that would stand out at most parks. Raptor, the park's V&M invert, sits adjacent to Valravn. This V&M creation offers multiple whippy and intense inversions with a mix of strong positives as well. Gatekeeper is a massive wing coaster that travels over the front entrance. It has 6 floating versions with a great color scheme that rivals any coaster in the world. Further back in the park is Rougarou, a solid floorless coaster that is a good filler coaster that gets overshadowed by everything else at Cedar Point. Cedar Point also has a collection of family coasters. Last year, Cedar Point added a Zamperla spinning coaster that is a decent stepping stone coaster for many ages with a Wild Mouse. Cedar Point also has an aero suspended coaster that gives some good forces and is a unique fit for the park with Iron Dragon. And in the kids section, there's a Vekoma family coaster and an Intamin kiddie coaster. Cedar Point offers many different resorts and hotels ranging from cabins to a full resort with a golf course. My favorite place to stay on our visits to Cedar Point is the Express Hotel. It has all the basic amenities of a typical chain hotel except free breakfast. Crucially, you also get early entry to the park and free parking if you drive to the park. It is the cheapest Cedar Point resort option if you are on a budget. Hotel Breakers is the premier hotel of the Cedar Point Resort. The advantages you get over the Express Hotel include access to the beach and multiple restaurants inside the hotel, and the ability to go to your room during your day at the park. It is nice to be able to return to your room for some food and relax for some time during the day in the Ohio heat. But if you are visiting Cedar Point, you are going to want to spend almost all of your time in the park and not spending time in your hotel room. As I mentioned earlier, there is also a nice beach you can spend time on, but to me,
these amenities are not worth the extra hundreds of dollars. It is almost $400 per night at Breakers compared to the around $200 per night at the Express Hotel. If you love Breakers and the experience it offers, I'm not going to tell you otherwise. But I've heard others almost say that you need to stay in Breakers if you go to Cedar Point. But I'll highly recommend the Express Hotel to anyone who doesn't want to spend the extra $200 a night for Hotel Breakers. Another on-site option is Lighthouse Point. The Lighthouse Point cabins are a similar price to Hotel Breakers, but you have your own little space tucked away by the lake. Perhaps if you have a group of friends, you could split the payment and it would be much more affordable because these cabins can sleep more people than the hotel rooms. The campsites are a cheaper way to stay on site as those are $139 per night. You also get great views of the lake and Steel Vengeance. There are two other off-site hotels, Castaway Bay and the new Sawmill Creek Resort located 10 miles from the park. Castaway Bay is a family-centered hotel with an indoor water park and a breakfast buffet add-on. A room and access to the water park costs almost $300 per night, which is right in the middle of the other prices. On the other hand, Sawmill Creek is definitely more adult-focused with an 18-hole golf course. It costs about $230 per night, but if you include the one-day golf package, the cost rises significantly. By staying at any of the Cedar Point properties, you get early entry to the park as well as free parking. Plus, you get an unlimited drink wristband if you choose to buy the Ride and Refresh package, which I also recommend getting. It costs slightly less than the same as individual tickets and parking, but you also get the unlimited drink wristbands, so those are essentially free because of the money you save. The park hasn't released its early entry lineup for this year yet, but last year the only major coaster open was Gatekeeper at the beginning of the season, and then I believe they added Millennium Force to that lineup later in the season. However, if the lineup is weak this year, it might not even be worth it to stay at a Cedar Point hotel for early entry. There are other chain hotels in the area like Holiday Inn or Fairfield which get decent reviews and don't cost near as much as the Cedar Point properties. Is Fastlane worth it? Contrary to what most people say, I don't think you need it. If you go to Cedar Point on a weekday, the park will still be busy, but you should be able to ride almost everything and the top attractions multiple times. What I think you should spend your money on is another day at the park because you will get to ride more coasters and not feel as rushed to cram everything in. Now, if you don't have the time to spend 2 days, maybe you should think about Fastlane, especially if you are going on a weekend. Another thing to help make your decision about Fastlane is qtimes.com. They have a crowd forecast that is normally fairly accurate so you can see if the day you're going on is supposed to be busy or not. If you plan on buying Fastlane, especially on a weekday, I'd recommend buying it in the park. As far as I'm aware, they almost never sell out of Fastlanes, and the price in the park is the same as online. So, you can wait to see the crowd levels in person to evaluate if you want to follow through and purchase Fastlane or not. In addition, if it is rainy at the park, it will probably be quite empty, so you might be throwing money away if you buy Fastlane in advance and have a rainy day with no lines anyway. What should you wear when you visit Cedar Point? Honestly, I'd recommend considering dressing in layers. In the morning, it is often quite cool, so you might be chilly, but by the afternoon, it can also be very hot, so you will want to be in shorts and a t-shirt. The weather can also change really quickly because Cedar Point sits on a lake. One thing I definitely recommend wearing is shorts with zippered pockets. This way, you don't have to put your phone into the bins on the ride platform or buy a locker for the rides that don't have bins. During your day at Cedar Point, I would recommend only eating one meal at around 2 to 4 o'clock and eating your other 2 meals of the day outside the park because park food is expensive. This is the time when rides will be the most busy and the food lines won't be as terrible during the typical lunch or dinner hours. This can save you some time and you might be able to sneak in a couple of extra rides because of it. I'd recommend using the website CP Food Blog, which I will link in the description, to plan ahead on where you want to eat, but my favorite restaurant in the park is personally the Backbeat Q. Now here's the route that I recommend taking to avoid waiting in big lines and getting the most rides out of your visit. This is built for a 2-day trip with early entry and no fast lane. I'd recommend getting to the park half an hour before early entry starts to get to the tolls and park, because they will actually start letting people in the park 15 minutes before early entry. So, once you're in the park for early entry, I recommend riding one of the big B&Ms like Gatekeeper, Valravn, or Raptor, and then Millennium Force if they are included in the early entry lineup. However, if Gatekeeper is the only coaster included, then go ahead and get some laps on that. If Steel Vengeance or Maverick are somehow included in the early entry lineup, then those are must rides. Right after you're done riding those coasters, get in line for Top Thrill 2. This coaster will probably have the longest lines of the day, no matter what time it is. I don't know how reliable it will be or how often it will actually open with the park, but I'd recommend getting in line for Top Thrill 2 around 15 minutes before the park opens. And I'd recommend getting 2 laps on it if you can still accomplish the next step. After getting a lap or 2 on Top Thrill 2, I would head back to Frontier Town to get laps on Steel Vengeance and Maverick if you can beat the normal entry crowds to one of them. You'll have to walk fast or run to get there, but it'll be worth it. These are 2 coasters where often you're going to have to just suck it up and wait in an hour-long line, but it's worth it. When you're done riding the 2 best coasters in the park, it will probably be around noon. After this, it will be your decision on what to ride. Gemini and Magnum XL 200 should have minimal lines because they have great capacity, so riding those should be your best bet. Plus, given their location, the GP probably won't have got to them yet. Then you should work your way to the front, riding Millennium Force again if you want to, and then the B&Ms. These are Raptor, Valravn, and Rougarou, and they are all line eaters, so their lines shouldn't be bad at all. At this point, you're going to have ridden almost or all of the elite coasters, and everything will have their longest lines of the day, so you're going to want to look at the wait times on the Cedar Point app. Usually, they're a little delayed or off, but it is still mostly accurate and the best way to avoid massive lines during the middle of the day. It also tells you what rides are currently broken down, which can be extremely helpful to avoid walking to an attraction that isn't even operating. A few extra tips I recommend doing to maximize your visit to Cedar Point is arriving at the park at least 20 minutes before it opens. This ensures that you have plenty of time to park your car and get to the front gate on time. And you will have a great parking spot and be one of the first people in the park. This allows you to hit more attractions before the majority of people arrive at the park. Another thing I try to do when I visit Cedar Point is taking time to relax and enjoy my time. Sometimes it is easy to get caught up trying to rush and speedrun every single attraction and roller coaster, but you will enjoy your time so much more if you take time to rest and relax. That will conclude our 2024 guide for the roller coaster capital of the world. If you have any thoughts or extra tips, leave them in the comments below. Thank you for watching.